Welcome to Mindful Live 79. I am your host Nathan Springer. It's a pleasure to have you here. It is the 20th of May 2022. Let's have a talk. We're talking about the issues that come across our mind for the day and for the weekend, etc., etc., etc. And I'm running live right now, streaming live over on TikTok, on Instagram, and now on YouTube also. So if you are looking at it over on TikTok or Instagram, and at any point in time you want to find out what we spoke about tonight, again, you can go over to my YouTube channel, Nathan Springer, over on YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you are on YouTube right now viewing this, if you are viewing it in the repeat or whenever else you view it, make sure you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, that's a strange thing. Please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there. And hit the like button. Double tap the screen if you're looking at this live over on TikTok, on Instagram. Make sure you hit like if you can. Hit that like button on the YouTube video also. Whenever you're looking at it, it helps. It helps spread the video out there. It helps not trick the algorithm. Tell the algorithm, hey, this is some good content. People like watching this stuff. Let other people see it too. Good night, Jellyfish. Good night, America. Good night, Shy Panda. Good night, all. Good night, Massimo Original. Can you turn down the music just a bit, please? Yes, the music is being turned down right now. You're inside interesting over on TikTok. Yes, and we're starting off tonight talking about the pay increase in the public service. If you see a smirk on my face whenever I talk about this, it's just every time I say this, I imagine one of those pictures where our finance minister, Mr. Colman, but he has a kind of very mischievous, cruel looking smile that he has sometimes. I could imagine him with that smile and the paper that says 0001001. My apologies. I understand very much. I understand that, especially when we're looking at a time like right now where inflation is going up so quickly. People are looking at their salaries and wondering, well, what is going to happen here? The salary isn't expanding fast enough to keep up with the expanding inflation. One of these things look like they're going down, and it looks like it's going to be me, and people are worried about this. And the strange thing, I think we discussed this before, but I always just find it so weird how we always talking about salaries from 20 years ago. Like your grandfather might still be debating and negotiating some of the salaries from when he was in his 20s. What is that? Like, what's the reason for that? Can't we get up-to-date salaries? Good night, Roni. Can we not discuss salaries for 2022 during the year of 2022? It's ridiculous. I do not find that to be a sensible way of doing business. To me, I find that was blatant disrespect to even consider that an offer. Now, there's an argument for that too. There's an argument that it's a negotiation, so they are putting their lower limit on the negotiation, on the negotiating table, and maybe the workers and their representatives would have to put their upper limit on the negotiation table, and they would negotiate a fair place somewhere in the middle. This is just the initial offer. They're saying that, listen, we're okay with 000 and just 2% spread out across 8 years. And someone in the chat, before we started over on the YouTube live, someone in the chat was pointing out that some of this might be the union's fault and that the unions aren't of use. The unions are doing more damage than they are doing benefit right now. And I can understand that argument. There are some times where I have said that I could kind of understand that the unions seem to be obsolete. I've said it before, but I'll say it again for the benefit of the YouTube video also. I have a belief that it may be possible that some unions have reached to their point of being obsolete, of obsolescence, because some of what unions were doing in the original sense, they were allowing the power of 2% increase, 0% 2014. I just like seeing it. 0% 2014, 0% 2015, 0% 2016, 0% 2017, 1% in 2018, 0% 2019, 0% 2020, and 1% in 2021. So all of that works out to 2% across the 8 years of bargaining that they were looking for. Blessed night, unknown boy. So, I think it may very well be that some unions have reached the point that they're no longer of that good use. The point of a lot of unions in the original sense, the general idea was simple. All these workers could combine their power, their ability, you have power as an employee. And if all of the workers combine it as a unit and they work together, they have a lot of power against the employer, who has way too much power for a single worker to take them on by themselves. So you get that collective power. That's why most unions lean down the collectivist side, going towards that socialism, and they talk that nonsense about comrade, linking back to communism back in the day, which scares me even more about some of those unions, to be very honest. But I like the collectivist idea in that sense. That makes sense there. All of you are in the same job. Yes, work together by all means. But as I was saying before we started over on YouTube here, that some of that collectivist ability, a lot of that collectivist ability, isn't needed to be done in any organization right now. You could go create a Telegram group and do 90% of what a union does over Telegram. Simple like that. So it may very well be that with the technology and the movement we've had in modern times, that some of the duties and some of the abilities of a union are obsolete. And I was saying that you see that in so many NGOs, non-governmental organizations, some of those charities that form with a purpose, and their purpose just keeps expanding as they cure one purpose. Because if I am some organization that makes money, I am getting donations, I am getting fees, I'm getting dues. However, I make money. And I make money going about trying to find a solution for this problem. Now, if I do solve the problem, then I don't make any money anymore. It's kind of that simple. So it's in my best interest not to solve the problem. And you could understand that when you look at some of those race rights organizations, even some of those LGBTQIA2+ organizations, you maybe wonder, why does the acronym keep getting longer? Well, maybe some of those organizations, I can't remember the name, the chief organization that was in charge of lobbying for gay marriage over in the United States, they were in charge, that was their sole purpose. This organization was created with the sole purpose of lobbying for homosexuals to be able to marry each other over in the United States. Now, when they got that, when that came and passed, the organization didn't fold up because they had millions of dollars of donations coming in per year, hundreds of millions even. And there were already people, wealthy CEOs, all in different positions in this organization. We accomplish our mission. We cannot just make this thing disappear. How can we do that? No. We can't do that. Here's what we'll do. We'll just find some other cause. And they keep pushing on their cause to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and now we have longer and longer organization names. And I think that argument could be said for some of the unions too. Maybe some of those unions have outlived some of their use, and maybe some workers may get better negotiation than doing it on a more individualistic basis. But the thing is, a lot of the unions have actually gone and become some of the same things they were fighting. They've become, as it were, corporations so large that they're very difficult to go up against. So the unions have made deals with politicians, have made deals with legislators to make laws that make it very difficult to exist outside of the unions. They have cornered themselves a corner of the market now. So the unions have now just gone and made themselves some other monster for the worker. It's so strange how many times you hear the workers in some of the unions have to get another union to argue with their union about getting a salary increase. It's so strange how many times you see that. The unions themselves, when you find out from the workers who work inside of the unions, they are being oppressed just as much as any of the worst corporations. The unions have gone and made themselves into the very things that they were fighting. Good night, Profusion. True, I think a similar situation would be with the ATF, which was originally created to assist the US with alcohol prohibition, which meant ATF was left without cause. Exactly. So many of the US have a million of those organizations going on. It was created for one thing, and then after the one thing is solved, what are we going to do? Well, we can't just fold up and not make any more money. That is not in the cards. How is that possible? So I was made to find rights for the left-handed people. I want left-handed people in this society to have equal rights to the right-handed people. And my organization was made with that intent. Now the laws have passed and left-handers have equal rights. But I get 100 million in donations every year to seek this left-handed cause. Am I just going to tell them, well, we have solved and now close the organization? Has anyone ever seen an organization do something like that, where they say, okay, we have accomplished what we were created to do, we now close our doors? Do organizations ever do that? Hardly ever. So maybe that argument might be true for the unions. I am sure many unionists would vehemently disagree. The problem, though, is that with this 0% that the government is offering all over the place, the problem then is, okay, if it's not 0%, then how much? I was asking that inside of the contemplation today. Thank you. I like the jersey too. One of my favorites. Inside of the contemplation today, how do we calculate a fair salary for public servants? How? Because if you're a doubles vendor, you sell your doubles for $5 or how much ever you sell your doubles. You sell 100 doubles per day, you get $500 in gross revenue. You know you have to buy some bara and some chana and whatever. You take away, etc., and you figure out how much you make for the day. If you work in KFC even, you could figure out or find out. They publish those numbers regularly. You work in KFC. You could see, okay, KFC, I am working in KFC Independence Square. KFC Independence Square has a turnover of XYZ million per how much ever. Well, I could watch this and I find, well, KFC, I find you all making a lot of money. This KFC is making a lot of money, off of my labor. So, well, I can see, looking from your profits, I can see, all right, well, there is where my salary should be increased. All right, I can make an argument there. But in the case of the government workers, how do you make an argument for a salary increase? How? Where does the argument come from? Because you see, I think a lot of people, and government work does this too. Public service does this. It removes the understanding of value and money. It separates the understanding of value and money. So you go to work and you do nothing for a month and they give you $8,000. You lose the understanding that $8,000, what that is supposed to be, is a representation of a certain amount of value put into the system. But when you were given that $8,000, you didn't put $8,000 worth of value back into the system. So you lose that understanding of the value of money. Money and value separates in terms of their understanding. I think the public service does some of that. That's why we see some of that poor customer service and so much of that expectation that we are entitled to this and we are entitled to that. While that's not really how it works. Now, because of that, when we're talking about public servant salary, what we have to do now is we look around to the market and see what someone else around that level is paid, and we'll guess it from there. That doesn't really make sense. I don't find that makes sense. Tiantec, I did this story. I think we spoke about this in one of the Mindful Lives too. Tiantec, back in February, they had a case in the industrial court because they wanted salary increases. But Tiantec, the company, the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission, is not making any money and has not been making money for a while. So when they went to the industrial court, the judges in the industrial court were like, well, I understand you want more money, but that's not how reality works. If you are working, I like to bring this back down to simple things for people to understand it better. If you are working for a farmer and the farmer is planting corn, and how much corn he plants is how much you can distribute among each other. If the farmer and you're working along with the farmer, you all plant corn and you all sell 100 corn, and the farmer, because he has to buy equipment, etc., he takes 80 worth of corn and gives you 20 worth of corn, and in that, really and truly, he has to figure out all of the other overhead charges, and he cannot afford anything different. If you now demand that you must get 30 corn, but you all still are only making 100, then you have to reduce how much the farmer is getting, which would reduce the amount he can put back into the system, which means by next year you may only be able to make 80 corn total, and you now demand 30 corn. That's just not how it works. There isn't the value within the system to get anything more out of it. I am not necessarily saying that this is for sure how it is in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know that for sure, but I'm saying that's the confusion that we end up with when we look at the public service and how we pay them, how we get the salaries for them. And if we are looking at Tiantec, where they weren't making any money, so the industrial court says, well, then we can't in good conscience say that we have to increase the salary of the workers if the company isn't making money. Then if we look at the public servants as being the employees of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the company that employs them is the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has been running deficit budgets since 2010, over and over and over and over and over again. Your company, the company that you work for as a public servant, is running on a bust. How do we then, in good conscience, realistically, how are we supposed to expect to have salary increases coming out of a company, understand, company government, that is running at a deficit? How is that realistic? Corruption is more of the issue than the workers. There isn't one. It is always subjective because it's not linked to market competition. Cocoa and coconut industry, where will the revenue come from? All right. Now, here's the thing. What I understand what you're saying, they're interesting, and I agree to some extent. Corruption is a big issue. So a lot of the time when you think about the government and their bad spending, and you're thinking about, as a good citizen of this Trinidad and Tobago, I have a vested interest in the government not wasting money, so I don't want to do things and suggest things that will be wasteful of our resources. And you're thinking about saving our country's resources, and then you see these politicians going there and they quickly blow out 200 million on their friends. You're like, well, when I get the chance, I should just take as much as I can. And that is the dilemma that you end up with in corrupt societies. Corrupt societies, they create negative feedback loops that keep feeding into each other. If I am in a corrupt society, everyone is stealing from the coffers of the country. We're all putting into the susu. That's the way I like to put it. Blessed night, Amisha John. We're all putting into the government susu, the country susu. We all put into that. That's the country's coffers. And then when I'm looking at it, let's imagine it as a chest of money just right there in the middle of the room, and all of us are there throwing in some money, and we're supposed to be organizing and controlling how this money is spent out of our pool of money. And I am only taking out barely any because I don't want to damage our future and our future prospects by overtaking out of our coffers. But then I see the politicians taking out handfuls and sticking in their pocket. Then they take out another handful and they stick in their brother's pocket. Then the deputy take out another handful and give to their child. And I'm looking at this and I'm only taking out one coin at a time, one coin at a time. After a while, I'm going to think, well, I am being a fool here. Maybe I should be grabbing the handfuls too. And then if I grab a handful, the man next to me looking at me will say, well, maybe I should be grabbing the handful too. And we end up with a society where everyone in the society, our main aim is to grab as much as we can. Our aim is anything in the country, we're aiming to grab it and pocket it as much as we can. We're not aiming to get that whole country first attitude. And I understand that. But I'm talking about if we're trying to get at this in a way that doesn't cause the destruction of the country. Yes, of course you can. Interesting. But again, for the public servants, that is the problem. Wow, that's the difficult situation you are put in when you are employed by a corrupt organization. You are employed by a government. Again, think of it as a public servant. Don't try not to think of it as the government hire me and the government had to pay me and the government go pay me till I dead. Try and think about it a bit. Try to think about it like a private organization of a sense, and the government is the company that you are working for, and all the manager, well, let's not say all, but the general trend of all the managers of your company that you work for as a public servant is that they are corrupt. The whole management of your organization is corrupt. Then you of course are in for licks. The organization is running at a deficit, is running on a bust, and the management is still stealing money. But because they are running at a bust, they can look at you as the worker and say, well, we can't increase your salary. But that's just reality. You work for a corrupt organization. If you work for a corrupt organization in the private sector, I had a family member, someone I know, that worked for an organization, and the organization was running into some hard times. One of the directors of the organization went into the organization as a hands-on manager to work for the organization for the while. And when he went in there, he began drawing a bigger salary. He basically went in to draw out all of the money out of the business before it crashes, and then he dove out. Now, in the general reality of private sector, the person who was employed there, what are you going to do? The company crashed because it had a corrupt administrative level. That is what it is. I'll say to many public servants, my advice to public servants is find a private job too. Not saying leave your public service job, but find a private job too, so that you get that understanding better of the value money dilemma, and that if things go south in this kind of insane organization that you are working in that runs everything on a deficit, you wouldn't be shocked by that. Public service strips people of their understanding of labor. That's my belief. I'm not saying I can't be wrong, but that's my belief. And I think if you look at the labor market in Trinidad, if you look at the labor market in many organizations, in many countries, where they have so much focus on public sector and public servants, they often don't seem to have that real good understanding of labor to value and that relation. What say you? Drop a comment if you have something to say. Of course, that's just my belief. You could say otherwise. Let's get into the article. I actually never read the article of the increase. CPO plus PSE 2% increase over 8 years. Wow. The PSA noted that the counter proposal sought to cover 2 periods, 2 4-year periods. The PSA said the offer included, other than the 2%, it included a cost of living allowances of $240 per month effective January 1st and $255 per month effective January 1st, 2021. The proposal included meager adjustments on some allowances with effect from December 1st, such as December 1st, 2021, such as upkeep allowance moving from $2,400 to $2,550, which represents an increase of $150, and kilometric allowance moving from $2.35 to $2.45, representing an increase of 10 cents. Those are allowances. All the public servants who are going to be complaining, it is all because they are hoping for a big back pay. And how do these public servants use their back pay? If we were to talk about redundancy of duties in the public service, that's the thing. So often we hear the unions in the public service rant and rave and talk about they are underpaid and overworked. But are we talking about how effective their work? Are we talking about how efficient they are? Are these workers in the public service giving the public good service for the money that the public is paying them? Like, we have to be real. And how many of these workers are literally just leeching down on our public purse? I'll have to find back that article, but I feel like that will be a good article to find, where the Prime Minister did a breakdown of how much it costs to run the country per day. And a breakdown of what it is makes up those costs. And salaries is the vast majority of all our bills that we pay as a country. We pay most of the money out in salaries. That's a lot of what we pay. And I feel like that isn't necessary. I feel like that might be unhealthy. It's not giving us a good work attitude in our country. It's pulling distance between the worker and value, understanding it. That's my view on that whole pay increase matter. The thing is, I am not saying, however, that public servants shouldn't get a pay increase. I hope that's not what is being understood, because I understand, as I said at the beginning, that inflation is here, inflation is hitting hard, and there are people in that's the whole problem. There are people in the public service who are working really hard, and maybe if you could do an audit of the amount of work that they are putting out there, maybe they are working well over what they are being paid. Maybe that may very well be true. But if I were to assume, I don't know for sure, but if I were to assume, I might assume it might be less than 20%, and I'm being generous, less than 20% of the public service would be putting out more than they are receiving. And I will say the other 80% would be very likely receiving more than they are putting out. And there might be 40% within that 80% that are putting out drastically less than they are getting from the system. So many of them say if it's all spent, it's a bit presumptuous. And is our public service positions properly filled by qualified candidates? Well, that's another matter. And I'm not even sure if the problem in our public service is qualification. I disagree with that. I throw away all the qualifications and hire people straight from CXC but have a proper supervisory system that can fire workers and make sure they are putting in the work, and all of a sudden you're going to get way more work for much less money. That's all you need. It's not about the qualifications. I don't subscribe to the view that makes it seem like qualifications make people better workers. That's not necessarily true. But I understand that certain jobs, certain portfolios just require qualification. I'm not denying that either. Massimo over on Instagram says, furthermore, every government tends to have monopolized control on various sectors of society, and thus this can give it tremendous power over citizens, especially considering that it has a legal monopoly on violence. Very true. You're speaking like a libertarian over there, Mr. Massimo. Why must I put out 100% when my employers only put out 1%? Trini Mike asks. Okay, that's fine, but that's the whole problem with the system. So everyone in the public service is looking at everyone else and saying, okay, no one in the public service is working for their money, so why should I? And then the whole public service, which is the biggest draw on our entire budget, the whole public service keeps sucking money while not providing the benefit for the country. And then when the country doesn't have enough money to keep up something like, let's see, a gas subsidy, then we wonder why Where's the money going? Why can't we keep our nice lucrative gas subsidy that allows us to pay it for cheap fuel? Listen, I'm going to tell you, I don't work in the public service, if you can't tell by now. Sorry. I'm going to tell you, I am okay with the public servants that aren't doing their job losing their job, cutting the public service maybe by a quarter or how much ever more is necessary, if that means we could get back our fuel subsidies. I'm okay with that exchange. Put the public servants into the private market, let them figure out the value of labor, and let the country get back the money and put back some fuel subsidy, let us drive for cheap. I find that's a better use of our money. Which is a better use of our money? Paying all these youth men to buy Van Heusen fitted pants and Van Heusen fitted shirt, to go down in Port of Spain and walk up and down and buy food in the food courts, to do absolutely nothing of benefit to the country. Maybe just keep the food court economy spinning. That's all they do of benefit to the country. Is that more of a benefit? Or if we could keep that money and pay it in the fuel subsidy and maybe pay fewer public servants better money. But the thing is, these things are not in a politician's best interest. No politician wants to be the one to say, listen, I'm going to fire some public servants, or I'm going to restructure the public service as such that the amount of work you do is what would allow your salary to increase or decrease. No politician wants to be the one to tackle that. They benefit by the way the system currently is. I keep saying this. It's kind of a flawed premise to believe that a politician who gains power by the system being the way it is going to get power and then change the system from being the way it is. If I got into power and I gain power with the status quo, what is my motivation to ever change the status quo? For the longest while, we've been begging them to upgrade the places of employment. Money is being allocated from budget, but can't see where it's being spent. I don't disagree with you, innit? That's why I said, Mr. Trini Mike, I said if I was a public servant, my main thing is looking out of the public service, because you cannot solve that as a public servant. No public servant could go into the public service there and show them how to work so hard that you change the whole public service. I just don't think that is possible. I honestly don't. A better performance appraisal system, of course, but again, no politician has that in their best interest. So who is going to put it in play? Who is going to do it? All right, that's that on the salaries. But there's more to get into. I was following a lot of these stories on. I was following the chain of stories, the whole long chain of stories on the children's home issues that we are facing in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, something that annoys me, disappoints me, aggravates me with a lot of this when I look at it, when I look at it, is the motives behind much of this do not seem to be with the children's best interests at heart. When you see the decisions being made, you're looking at it and looking like, okay, you're doing this action, what could you possibly be looking for as the end result of this action? Does it realistically end in children getting something better out of this? Or does it end in political points? Or does it end in your career advancement? Or does it end in you getting attention for whatever you want attention for? And that's probably the most disappointing thing with a lot of this. All right, we're getting into this. As usual, once you're inside of the live, make sure you're hitting that like button so the algorithm lets everyone know, hey, this is a good live. Share it to people. Yes, hit that like button. Let the likes know that you're there, whether you're on TikTok, TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube. And if you are on any of the other lives and you're wondering about the YouTube, yes, there's a YouTube live. But the thing is, you don't have to go over to the YouTube live to look at it right now, because it's going to be there all the time. Nathan Springer is my channel on YouTube. Nathan Springer, my name. You go over there and subscribe to my channel and catch all of the Mindful lives there whenever you want. You can catch it on repeat, slow it down, speed it up, whatever you like. If you're looking at this right now on YouTube on repeat, well, make sure to hit that like button if you've already reached this far, and make sure you're subscribed also. All right, we're getting into those disappointing stories. Now, the first thing I'd like to point out with this is it was obviously, to me, this seems to have obviously been a pretty well orchestrated political plan by the opposition. That's what it seems like to me, at least the beginning of it. Because when you look at the series of events, you could see that the opposition kind of had this plan. And in terms of the political nature of it, in terms 868 Cokes, no, sir, you are not early. Or ma'am, I'm not sure if you say oh ma'am. But if you look at the politics of it, it was a well orchestrated political plan. You watch it, they released the videos and the allegations of this report first. That was released and thrown into the public sphere. And obviously they knew that the PNM would have something to say about it. The PNM quickly came out and denied anything and said that they know and they didn't know this happened, and if they knew, they would have been as disgusted as everyone else, and something must be done, and showed their righteous indignation. And right after the PNM did that, the UNC then came out with all the recorded instances of where the PNM officials, the PNM politicians, would have known about this report. That was an orchestrated thing. I don't think they waited until after the PNM said they didn't know and all of that to then find all of those instances, because they have the quotes from inside of the parliament's Hansard. So I think it was orchestrated all along. That's the first part. All right. Opposition leader. PM caught lying about SABGA report. Opposition leader Kamala Prasad-Bisesa says the PNM saying the SABGA report was somehow buried is a lie. In a press release, issued this afternoon. Now that would be the afternoon of this article, which was from Wednesday, May 18th. She stated that recommendations made in the SABGA report were enacted in Parliament by the Pandey government, and several bills were introduced. However, the subsequent PNM government refused to implement them. The following is a press release from the opposition leader. It is not surprising that Keith Rowley is focused on the Robert Sabga's report commissioned 25 years ago, rather than the Justice Jones report outlining serious sexual and physical abuse occurring presently under the Children's Authority. This is clearly an attempt to deflect from the disclosure that high-ranking PNM members were involved in the pedophile ring. The PNM is instead focused on smearing Robert Sabga and falsely claiming that the report produced by him, led by his committee, was somehow buried. The idea that the report produced by him and the team was somehow a secretive document or was buried is a complete lie. On the contrary, she goes on now to list the instances where the PNM would have known about this. The recommendations made in the SABGA report were enacted in Parliament by the Pandey government. The following bills were introduced in 1999 in response to the SABGA report, sent to a joint select committee and passed in 2000. Now, a joint select committee means that PNM members would have been inside of that committee too, which the subsequent PNM government refused to implement. The Children's Authority Bill of 1999, the Children's Amendment Bill of 1999, the Adoption of Children Bill 1999, the Miscellaneous Provisions Children Bill 1999, the Children's Community Residences, Foster Homes and Nurseries Bill 1999. So the UNC has their receipts. We introduced the bill since 99. And they didn't go forward. Now, the Children's Authority Bill and the Children's Bill, which then became, I believe, the Children's Act, those were enacted, I believe, in 2010. And the UNC really and truly, one of the ways you could see that some politics is being played in this is this same lady who sent this press release was in charge of a government for 5 years, and she didn't enact these either until like the last month in the last year of their reign. So this is all politics. That's why I said at the very beginning of this, one of the most disappointing things about all of this is that it doesn't seem like a lot of it has anything to do with benefiting the children, but on playing politics with the upcoming elections right on the horizon there. But she has proven here that the PNM would have known at least about these bills. Number 2, Minister Ramsaran has stated on Hansard that the Sabga report was laid in Parliament. Rowley has been in Parliament since 1987, so he would have been there. Number 3. Minister Ramsaran has publicly stated that he gave a copy of the Sabga report to then Commissioner of Police Hilton Guy and discussed the same with him. I am not sure Ramsaran said that. Number 4, the Sabga report and its recommendations have been referenced numerous times in relation to legislation enacted by the Pandey government to improve, including by Camille Robinson-Regis. Now, that seems very strange because Miss Robinson-Regis is part of the PNM's women arm, who came out with a scathing rebuke when the Sabga committee report was revealed on the UNC platform. And they spoke as if they never heard anything about this report before. And now we see that Miss Robinson-Regis would have directly had knowledge about this, because it was referenced in Parliament by Senator Ramesh Deusaran. This is in 2002. Deusaran said, almost 5 years ago, there was a report on children's homes. It is commonly called the Sabga report. The gentleman who did the report under the Ministry of Social Development was Mr. Robert Sabga. I would suggest that the minister look at that report carefully. Robinson-Regis is on record as saying, in fact, that particular Sabga report was used by the then Ministry of Social Development to examine all the issues as they related to the care of children. The issues that were raised in that report were very revealing in circumstances where our society had depended on a number of foster homes to ensure care for our young children and for children who had suffered abandonment by their families. That report did in fact inform quite a number of the policies that were developed during that period, especially as they related to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Okay, Miss Robinson-Regis. Mr. Robinson-Regis, it seems like you had direct knowledge of this report. From that statement there, it could sound nearly like you in fact read the report. That's 2002. Granted, that's 20 years ago, but that isn't that long ago. You're supposed to have some knowledge of that. You said that the report was used to shape policy. Now, I think this is less of an indictment against the PNM in terms of them protecting pedophiles and protecting children abusers, and more of an indictment showing the nature of politics and the nature of politicians. They love reports. They love reports. There are reports being created constantly because a report throws it off to some professional somewhere. You get to pay someone who was university educated to use their university education that they may have never been able to use otherwise. And they create some report that you're barely going to read. And then you're going to hand the report down to some of your staff, ask the staff to create something. The staff don't care because they know you don't care. And they know also in 5 years you're not even going to be there. So they don't have to work too seriously on that. And you say all of the pleasantries that you have to say in front of the camera, and all of the cliches that you have to say to the public. You say all of that, and then you forget about that because that's not actually serious to you. I think that's more of an indictment on the political nature of our system. Now, they went on to list several other times. June 2006 in the House of Representatives. Line Minister Manohar Ramsaran referenced it on the Hansard, saying, I remember when I first talked about the abuse of children reaching my ministry in this parliament, the member of Diego Martin East laughed and asked me if I was living somewhere in Mars. We appointed a committee which was headed by Robert Sabga to investigate yada yada yada. He mentioned that in parliament. In 2008, former Attorney General Ramesh Maraj also acknowledged the Sabga report and was recorded in the Hansard as saying, but on the same page in 2000, after recommendations from the 1997 yada yada yada. So now the former Attorney General Ramesh Maharaj referenced it. Now that may sound interesting to me as one of the stories that I have pulled up today, where Mr. Ramesh Maharaj spoke about it, he nearly spoke like if he forgot about speaking and referencing this report. And again, that is not an indictment against them in terms of welcoming child abuse, but in terms of the nature of politics in this country. When they say what they say in Parliament, a lot of them say it there and they forget about it because it doesn't have that much meaning to them. So, as I was saying, I believe the onset of this, the creation of this, the beginning of this was actually a well orchestrated political trap, and it was well done. Props to the UNC in terms of that. Now, because of how the UNC says what they say many of the times, the UNC doesn't have a broad reach. They don't have a broad reach. So if I were to relate everything that the UNC said in setting up this political trap, a lot of people would be like, oh my goodness, that's what went on there. That doesn't look good for the PNM at all. Now, if you look at the news stories of the UNC relating the same thing over the last 2 weeks, people are going to be like, oh gosh, I'm talking nonsense again. And it's not necessarily people who are staunch PNM, but it's just the nature of how our opposition does what our opposition does. Our opposition, they don't do it well. They have a lot of cards to play and they just don't play it well. They're flush with 6 pieces of trump and they still manage to get their jack hung. So strange. But let's go further into this story because it is really a terrible thing. As Christopher Linko says, Lawrence Maharaj said it never reached his hand, which is strange seeing as he spoke about it right there back in what year that was. They said in 2008. Up till 2008 he spoke about it and spoke. Let's see directly what he spoke about, because we are going to see where he says it never reached his hands. But on the same page in 2000, after recommendations from the 1997 Task Force Report on Children in Institutions, a comprehensive pack of legislation was enacted. The major components of the package was the different acts which provided for the establishment of the Children's Authority to act as a guardian for the children in Trinidad and Tobago. The authority is to advise the minister with responsibility, etc., 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 to investigate complaints. Right. The act is yet to be proclaimed, so the Ministry of Social Development was saying up to 2006. Right. Now, what he was saying there is that they hadn't proclaimed the act yet. He was complaining about that fact. But if he was the Attorney General that was in power at the time when these acts were created, and they said that the acts, in order to create these pieces of legislation in the first place, they depended heavily on this report, well, how did the report never reach your hands? Which is even further strange, which is even more strange considering that the minister who got the report in the dark of night, yes, in case you forgot, how they said they exchanged the report, Mr. Sabga met Minister Manohar Ramsaran in the middle of the night and took out 40 copies out of his trunk and gave it to Minister Ramsaran back then. And then Minister Ramsaran proceeded to distribute that to all of the ministers in that government at that point in time. So all of the ministers in that government at that point in time should be able to say that they had their hands on that. Okay. Let's get into some of the worst parts of this report and why I find it so horrible that this thing is being more politicized than actually trying to get to the solution of these problems. Nearly every time we raise the issue isn't raised to find a solution, but for people to use the cruelty that some of these children really did go through, use that cruelty for their own gain. I find that reprehensible. I find that to be very mirroring of the use of black suffering over in the United States. Every time some black man is killed by the police, some political group runs up to represent the black people, and they don't actually care about the black people because they use use misrepresentations of statistics. They just want you to cry on TV so that they can pull your vote into politics. And it's kind of the same thing here. You're using legitimately sad, legitimately horrible scenarios to try and gain political points and political vantage. Now, it's not just the opposition, because the PNM just as much did that when they were trying to point the finger back at the UNC, as it were, with this situation. SABGA report, recommendation given to man who molested 40 boys. The 1997 Robert SABGA report into the abuse of 10 children's homes is now in the public domain, and its contents are just as disturbing as the recent 2021 investigation. Within the 70-page document titled Report of the Cabinet Appointed Yada 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 is a story that can rival even the most chilling reports of abuse in the more recent Judith Jones-led investigation. Page 36 of the report reveals the alleged crimes of a staff member of the St. Dominic's Home for Children who molested up to 40 boys before the facility's management stepped in. The report states that the staff member committed several acts of abuse of a sexual nature. These included, I am not going to quote all of them. This was first highlighted in the now defunct TNT Mirror newspaper in December of 1997. But 2.5 decades later, the details are still disturbing. The report says one young boy finally disclosed all, and the alleged perpetrator was confronted. He admitted his actions and explained that he too had been abused by St. Dominic's. Cycle of abuse. However, what happened next astonished the investigative team. Sister Marina asked him to volunteer his resignation that day, and all of his leave, etc., was paid to him in full. The matter then was promptly swept under the carpet, and no counseling or follow-up with the children involved was done, ostensibly to protect the reputation of the home. The report went on to say that, most astonishing of all, this Mr. allegedly got a letter of recommendation from St. Dominic's and is now reportedly employed at St. Anne's Hospital. Yeah. The journalist who broke the story back in 1997 and the TNT Mirror that we were just speaking about, he came out also. The journalist who broke the story in the SABGA report, authorities protected these people. David Millett, the lone journalist who broke the story on the SABGA report, is saying he remains hopeful that the perpetrators highlighted then will be brought to justice. Millett wrote 6 stories in the Mirror outlining in detail the findings of the SABGA-led task force, none of which prompted any police action. Some of the headlines read, sex abused at children's homes, incest victims treated like a criminal, homosexuality home, Pantin can't axe wicked St. Jude's nun, and staffer encourages boys to have sex while he watches. Many horrible stories. The reporter went on to say there were a bunch of cowards operating. It would have mashed too many corns, and as such they protected these people. It was shocking, revolting to say the least. It was distasteful as to how the nuns and others were treating the children, he recalled. It was the person who gave me the report gave it to me because they were clear that nothing would be done about it. I believe the person that is why they wanted this to be exposed. I believe the person that is why they wanted this to be exposed. They wanted to at least get the details out there with the hope that something would be done, he revealed. Now, this isn't just an indictment on the PNM where allegedly the problem was the paper, no one took on the Mirror. The problem wasn't just the paper, because the paper quoted a report that all the ministers of government had. So, okay, you didn't take the TNT Mirror seriously. That paper don't tell the truth, okay, fine. But they quoted a report that was in the hands of all of the government ministers. So, this cannot just be said that the PNM may have been protecting their boys. This would have been from everybody turning a blind eye. Something like this that reached the papers. Some other one of the ministers would have seen this and wanted to know what's going on. Some other one of the newspapers. Why was it only the TNT Mirror that did this story? Do you think that someone like this, because the journalist said that person came to him because they wanted the story revealed because they knew nothing was going to be done. Do you think the person that went to the TNT Mirror only went to the TNT Mirror, or do you think they would have shopped that story around very likely to every one of the newspapers? It was only this journalist in the TNT Mirror who was brave enough to actually write these stories. I believe all of the other newspapers very likely would have gotten that story and refused it. I would like to find that person. Probably if, you see, this is where serious investigative journalism could come in. If we could trace back that source, and if they were willing to drop it into the newspapers way back in 1997, if maybe they're still alive, they may be willing to say which newspaper they went to and offered the story and who said no. Let's find that out, because just as bad as a lot of the perpetrators would have been the upholders, the people who knew that this disgusting story was going on around there. They knew what was happening to many of these people trapped in these homes, and they did nothing about it when they could have. The former Attorney General, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, is saying though that even though so much time has passed, something can still be done. Ramesh, not too late to prosecute child abusers. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, speaking to the Guardian Media Limited, says it is not too late to prosecute individuals who may have committed criminal offences based on the content of that report. It is important for relevant investigations to be conducted and for the persons to be identified who have committed offences. Prosecuted because there is no time limit for the prosecution of individuals in respect to those who commit criminal offences. Maharaj also called on the police to investigate why the report was buried and not made public. Now that seems very strange, because Mr. Maharaj was the Attorney General and he boasted back in 2008, was it, that they brought forth legislation based on this report. So how was the report both buried and used to form legislation at the same time? And you got a hand delivered copy of this report. So you, as the Attorney General back then, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, were you not able to do something about this? Were you not able to hand this over to the DPP or to the police or to someone? Attorney General, you know, that's kind of someone who you'd think could get something done within this realm. Protect the reputation of the home by continuously sweeping the slackers under the carpet. Yep, that is what they did. Maharaj has been part of the Basu Pandey government when the report was published in TNT Mirror in December 1997. However, he said he was not aware of the contents of the report. Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, who was the Attorney General when the report was done, and who the writer of the report said the report was given to, and who would have also been partly responsible for drafting legislation based on the report. Tell me how we have 4 or 5 pieces of legislation and the Attorney General in charge of drafting it said that he never saw the report. Interesting, very interesting. Said he was not aware of the contents of the report. It was never shown to me as the Attorney General. Based on what Mr. Sabga said, the UNC was not involved in that report. They commissioned it, and it depends on when it was finished and compiled, and it was handed to the UNC administration, at Maharaj said. Well, that's something very strange is going on there. The police, though, are now finally investigating. And this was the question I always had. This was the question I always had with this. And this is why I know people are playing games. Mr. Sabga said that some of the things they brought up were just allegations. They didn't necessarily have the evidence. And we heard some of that come from Mr. Manohar Ramsarantu, who was the minister in charge of it at that point in time. But my question is, why not give the allegations, because they had, what was it, 80 pages worth of allegations in this report? Why not give it back then to the police? and the police in charge of investigating matters, or if it was given to the police, then all the questions from everyone else could then turn to why the police didn't reach further in this. It's the police job to investigate the allegations. It's the police job to gather evidence. And the police now are saying that they are going to investigate it. They are launching an investigation based on the Sabga report now. So I'd suppose that the legal infrastructure of Trinidad and Tobago hasn't changed that much from 1997 till now as relating to police launching investigations. So I would have supposed that in 1997 the police could have launched an investigation using the same report back then. Very strange. Something is very strange there. And then, adding to all of this, the ultimate in all of this, to show how something very strange is going on with this. If they were to launch the report, the police were to launch an investigation since 1997. They're now asking for victims and survivors, etc., to come forward with their statements and their witness recounts. If they're doing that now, couldn't they have done that very same thing back in 97 and asked witnesses to come forward? And don't you think witnesses would have come forward in 1997? I think so. Because you see, the abuser who allegedly abused 40 boys and then was given the recommendation, the boy who sold him out to a teacher. So obviously this boy seemed like he was of the view, I am willing to sell out people on this. If they asked for this starting back in 97, I think that boy would have come forward. And the reason I could say that even till now is because the boy, now a man, has come forward again. I am sexual abuse evidence. Former ward at St. Dominic's Children's Home recalls ordeal of being raped at 9 years old. A man who was sexually abused over 25 years ago, when he was about 9 years old, wants the sexual monster to be brought to justice. The man who shared his heart-wrenching experience with the Express said he's willing to tell all to the police. Hope that the abuser who sexually abused 30 to 40 children at the home is finally held accountable. The victim provided a detailed account of the horror he endured at the hands of the man. It included being fondled by a priest who was aware that he was abused, and a sister at the home who burnt all the kitchen towels after learning the perpetrator used these to clean up and help to bury all of this. All right. On Monday, after Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley publicly called an acting police commissioner to launch an investigation into the report, the victim, the name they're using in the article is Bradley. It's not the man's name, it's a false name, but the name they're using in the article is Bradley, messaged the Prime Minister via social media and questioned whether his abuser, referring to his abuser by name, can be prosecuted. That's how you could tell this young man was willing to give evidence since 97. This young man seems like he was willing since then and up till now to make sure that this abuser comes to justice. And I could see why when you go through this story. You could see why. He messaged the Prime Minister and called the man name and say, I want him to still be brought to justice. I am evidence. Bradley told the Express yesterday he is enraged that nothing was done in the face of the report, that the police took no action, and that he and the 40 other boys who were abused never got justice. He said he was also angry when he read Sabga saying that the police will be chasing ghosts, and former Social Development Minister Manohar Ramsaran stating there was no evidence. He's angry at people talking about chasing ghosts and saying there was no evidence. I am the evidence. He says, it happened to me. It was all covered up. The home failed us. The then government failed us. The task force failed us. Nothing was done. The police could have investigated and gotten the evidence. There were many of us, he said. So this talk about chasing ghosts and there being no evidence, and well, we couldn't investigate, there was no evidence back then. Well, it's nonsense. So says the boy who was at the center of the story since back then. And you know how you could tell the timeline of this story? The Sabga report had this man who allegedly abused 40 children and was then transferred. The Sabga report had this man's story in it. So that means this boy would have come forward with this story since before the Sabga report was done. There were obviously witnesses willing to tell all before the Sabga report was done. So how come you couldn't get a witness willing to go on record? Something isn't adding up. Okay. Bradley said he was taken from his family's home by court order as a toddler and placed at the St. Dominic's home, where he spent his first few years at the nursery, and then went on to the St. Martin department, where a number of boys were housed. He said Mr. X, which was the perpetrator's name, was the supervisor of this department, and the boys saw him as a role model because he was a former resident of the home, and he was then in charge and held a commanding authority. Now, we could see several things in this. Hurt people kind of thing, and that the home was creating their own horrible negative feedback loop. We learned from a previous story that this man who abused 40 people was also abused when he was younger. This man was also a ward of the home. This man was abused in the same home and is now going back and returning to abuse more boys back in the same home again. Finishing the cycle, continuing the cycle. Horrible stuff. All right. At the time, he said Mr. X was in his 20s with a light brown complexion and was the youngest supervisor at the institution. While he was admired, he was also feared because when Mr. X shared licks, it was licks like peas. We were afraid of him. He would use a cane or a leather belt on us if the bed was untidy or if our shoes were dirty. Bradley said Mr. X was management's favorite and had privileges, such as taking some of the boys home on weekends. So now, to go back to a previous discussion we had on corporal punishment. So, for example, the reason corporal punishment often has so many horrible statistics when you view the statistics in general is because what they describe Mr. X doing there would be considered corporal punishment, but a man beating on little orphans for having dirty shoes isn't general corporal punishment. That's abuse. And this man was an abuser, obviously. He said later on in his life he learned from other boys that they were sexually abused at Mr. X's home. It was awful and painful. Bradley said the St. Martin department of the home comprised 2 floors and an attic area. The upper level had the beds and the lower level the dining room and kitchen area. My bed was closer to the staircase and I could see who was going downstairs at night. When Mr. X had night shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I would see boys going down at night quietly, he said. I remember one night I was asleep and felt someone touching me. Mr. X was in a short pants and t-shirt and he signaled me to go downstairs. I was fearful and was wondering what I did wrong. I complied and went downstairs. He came after and took off my clothes and started to touch me inappropriately. That continued there. He did that same kind of wake them up in the middle of the night and take them down until eventually he ended up going all the way and actually raping that boy. He said each encounter of sexual abuse lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. Bradley said he was a pupil at the St. Martin's RC Primary School and his teacher noticed his behavior and his behavior had changed and he was withdrawn and in a daze. There are some good teachers out there. This is testament to that. The teacher noticed that the boy was moving different. The boy didn't just come to the teacher noticed the boy was moving different. He said she kept asking him what was wrong. Again, the teacher didn't just ask him what was wrong. She kept asking him what was wrong. She persisted asking him what was wrong. And he divulged the sexual abuse he suffered by Mr. X. The teacher, he said, told the principal, who in turn called the home's manager. Bradley said several of the home's management, in terms of the sisters, were informed of what happened. The headmistress, who was in charge of the department, burnt all the towels and got new towels, he said. That's destroying evidence, just by the way. So already she is going to jail. She's already supposed to be going to jail. Headmistress, jail. Mr. X was called and told to immediately come to the office as it was his day off. He said Mr. X was confronted and asked about the abuse, and he confessed that he had sexually abused Bradley and others. He was asked to resign, and he resigned with immediate effect, and he left the compound, and that was it. We now know that he was paid off also, and he was given a letter of recommendation to go and work in St. Anne's. Even after I told them what happened, I was never medically examined. The home didn't provide any counseling. You see, if he was medically examined or if he spoke to a counselor, then there was a trail of evidence that could then lead back to the home again. Of course, Bradley said after this ordeal, he was subjected to a second encounter of abuse, where at the church, after a priest knew that he was abused, the priest told him, "Don't worry, I will be there for you." And then the priest started to fondle him until a teacher or a nun walked in and stopped it, a sister. Horrible stuff. Now, here's the part where I fully understand why this man would be so interested in getting justice for this. Bradley said later, when he was around 19 years old, a gay friend took him to a place called the Boy Code, and he saw Mr. X there. Mr. X walked up to me and said, "You see, you like this from a long time. You make me lose my work for nothing." At 19, this boy who was abused to the most disgusting extent of it meets the abuser in a gay bar. The abuser sees him, recognizes him, is bold enough to walk up to him. This man is supposed to be rotting in jail right now. He is bold enough to walk up to the boy he abused and tell him, "Hey, you see, you like this from a long time. You make me lose my work for nothing." The abused man said, "I said nothing and just walked away." Today he is married and has a family of his own who does not know the secret he holds that weighs heavy on his heart and causes his continued pain, trauma, and nightmares. "I have a family now and they don't know anything about what transpired. I do not feel comfortable sharing this with them." Yeah. There are victims out there, many of them. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them would be very willing to come forward. And Mr. X, whatever his name might be, if he was in his 20s, 25, let's say, in 90s, 25, that's 20 years ago, he'd be about 50 right now. This man is a 50-year-old man working in St. Anne's right now. Now, the part about this being so politicized that makes it so horrible also is that the politics talk about this that has been going on for 2 weeks or so, a week at least. That man, Mr. X, who abused 40 children and then just went off to St. Anne's for another job, don't you think he would know that now he is in danger of being prosecuted? I wouldn't be surprised if at any point in time the police close in on him, that he's already gone. Because he reads the news too, probably. He listens to the news too, probably. And politicians have been plastering this all about the place irresponsibly without the intention of actually getting any justice. So all you do is inform them. And on that somber note, that's all I have for now, folks. My voice is kind of going, so I think we're going to skip the Mindful Live after chat tonight. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And I will see you again Monday for the next Mindful Live at 9:30 p.m. Be sure to tune in. Be sure to tune in. It's usually nice. I hope you enjoyed it. I think you all enjoyed it. Good night, KJig 8701. Last night in the afterlife, I wanted to get in some more discussions with you, KJig, because I think that you had some interesting points to make, but it was just going all haywire. My apologies. I didn't get to finish that discussion. But we will catch up next time. I'm glad that you were in the live tonight also. Peace. It was nice. Love you all is one love. Latest, I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, as I usually say. And catch you all next week, Monday, for the next Mindful Live with Ethan Springer, your host here on Mindful Live. And next week, Tuesday, there's supposed to be a discussion on abortion with one of my regular viewers and the regular contributors towards the next, regular contributors in the afterlife session. We are going to have a discussion on abortion at the next Mindful Live on Tuesday, not the next one on Monday. The one on Tuesday, we'll have that discussion. If you would be interested in that discussion, be sure to tune in next week, Tuesday. Yeah, until then, Ronnie Gill, my voice. We will link.